Findings being published in a new book out today on the Shroud of Turin. That's the linen cloth believed to bear Jesus' imprint as he was being prepared for burial. And now there's new research that may disprove the claim of people who've said it's an elaborate fake.
A 14-foot linen has baffled the world for centuries, the Shroud of Turin.
The mysterious Shroud of Turin is something that has baffled scientists for years and been a source of great wonder to faithful all over the world.
Millions believe it wrapped Jesus. Skeptics call it a fake. Now, AI has found hidden codes, impossible 3D patterns, and secrets no human could make. Scientists are stunned. And there's a second cloth. Same blood, same wounds, same man. The evidence is undeniable. Hit subscribe. You're about to see ancient mystery meet cutting-edge tech, and reality will never look the same. The impossible. Image. Here's what we know for certain. The Shroud of Turin shows the faint image of a man who appears to have been crucified. Wounds on the wrists, feet, side, head, all matching the biblical description of Jesus' crucifixion. But here's what makes absolutely no sense. When Italian lawyer Secondo Pia took the first photograph of the shroud in 1898, he made a discovery that should have been impossible. In the dark room, when he developed the photographic negative, he nearly dropped the plate in shock. The image on the cloth was a photographic negative, and the negative of a negative creates a positive, revealing a stunningly clear, detailed portrait of a man's face. Think about what that means. This cloth predates photography by centuries. The concept of a photographic negative didn't even exist until the 1800s. Yet somehow, someone in medieval times or earlier created a perfect negative image on linen. How is that even possible? But it gets weirder, much weirder. Scientists discovered that the image is ridiculously superficial. It only exists on the topmost microfibers of the linen threads, with a depth of just a few hundred nanometers. For comparison, a human hair is about 80,000 nanometers thick. The color doesn't soak into the cloth like paint or dye. There are no brush strokes, no directionality. It's like the fibers themselves were chemically altered at a molecular level to produce color. Teams of scientists have tried everything to replicate it. They've used heated statues, acid painting, dust transfers, laser technology. They can get close to some features, but they've never been able to reproduce all the unique properties simultaneously. And then came the discovery that changed everything. In the 1970s, researchers at the Air Force Academy used a VP-8 image analyzer, a device originally designed by NASA to map the surfaces of planets, on a photograph of the shroud. What they found defied explanation. The image contains accurate three-dimensional information. Unlike a normal photograph, where light and shadow are just visual tricks, the shroud's image intensity corresponds directly to the distance between the cloth and a three-dimensional body. Darker parts, like the tip of the nose, were closer to the cloth. Lighter parts were farther away. When they fed this data into the computer, it generated a perfect three-dimensional relief map from a two-dimensional image. No painting has ever been known to contain that kind of spatial data. No photograph works that way. Nothing in medieval art comes close. It's as if whoever or whatever created this image encoded mathematical information about depth and distance into the very fabric itself. But the medieval carbon dating in 1988 seemed to settle the debate. 3 laboratories independently tested a sample and concluded the cloth dated from 1260 to 1390 AD. Case closed. Medieval forgery. Move on. Except it wasn't closed. Not by a long shot. The carbon dating controversy, here's where the story gets absolutely wild and shows how one flawed test nearly buried the truth forever. In 1988, officials cut a small sample from one corner of the shroud and sent it to 3 laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. All 3 independently dated the cloth to between 1260 and 1390 CE. The world's media declared the mystery solved. The shroud was officially labeled a fake. But almost immediately, scientists started noticing serious problems. Enter Raymond Rogers, a chemist from Los Alamos National Laboratory who had been part of the 1978 Shroud of Turin research project. Rogers was initially skeptical of any attempt to dismiss the carbon dating. He even called such efforts ludicrous. But in 2003, Rogers obtained leftover threads from the 1988 sample. What he found under the microscope shocked him to his core. The sample fibers were chemically different from fibers in the main body of the shroud. The sample threads were coated with plant gum and interwoven with cotton fibers, whereas the rest of the shroud is pure linen. He also found traces of dye. His conclusion, published in the peer-reviewed journal Thermochimica Acta in 2005, was explosive. The sample that was carbon dated wasn't part of the original cloth at all. It was from a medieval patch, expertly rewoven to repair damage. Think about that. It's like testing the age of an ancient brick building by taking a sample from modern mortar. Of course, it will give you a modern date. Here's why this matters. The sample was taken from one of the most handled areas of the entire cloth, a corner that had been held up for display for centuries. The shroud also survived several fires, including a major one in 1532. After that fire, nuns patched the damaged areas and sewed the shroud onto a new backing cloth. The corner where the 1988 sample was taken, right next to one of these patched areas. Rogers also found something else stunning. Using vanillin testing, a chemical marker that breaks down over time, he estimated the main body of the shroud was between 1,300 and 3,000 years old, potentially placing it at the time of Christ. Other studies have since supported this. In 2024, Italian scientist Liberato De Caro used wide-angle X-ray scattering to analyze the shroud's fabric, comparing it with a linen sample from the Siege of Masada, Israel, dated between 55 and 74 CE. His findings? The shroud appears to be approximately 2,000 years old. De Caro's team also discovered Middle Eastern pollen grains embedded in the linen fibers, seemingly ruling out the idea that the fabric came from Europe. So we're left with a massive contradiction. Medieval carbon dating, but ancient chemistry, first-century pollen, and image properties that seem centuries ahead of their time. And then came 1978, the year that changed everything. The STURP investigation, 120 hours that shook science. In October 1978, something unprecedented happened. The Vatican granted a team of 33 American scientists and researchers, known as the Shroud of Turin Research Project, or STURP, 5 days of continuous access to the shroud. These weren't fringe researchers or religious zealots. This team included scientists from Los Alamos National Laboratory, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the Air Force Weapons Laboratory, and major universities. They brought 7 tons of the most advanced scientific equipment available at the time. For 120 continuous hours, 5 straight days, they worked in shifts around the clock, running every test imaginable on this cloth. They used X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy, infrared thermography, ultraviolet photography, optical microscopy up to 1000x magnification, laser microprobe Raman spectroscopy, multispectral photography across various wavelengths. It was the most comprehensive scientific examination ever performed on any archaeological artifact in history, and what they found changed the entire debate. First, the blood. Scientists John Heller and Alan Adler conducted extensive microchemical testing on the reddish stains. Their conclusion, published in peer-reviewed journals, the stains were real blood, containing hemoglobin, serum albumin, and bilirubin. Not paint, not dye, not pigment. Blood. But here's where it gets forensically fascinating. The blood contained elevated levels of bilirubin, a bile pigment that spikes dramatically in trauma victims who've been tortured. When someone suffers extreme physical trauma, their body releases massive amounts of bilirubin as cells break down. The blood on the shroud shows exactly what you'd expect to find on someone who had been scourged, beaten, and crucified. STURP also discovered something remarkable using UV fluorescence photography, serum halos around the bloodstains. When blood separates from serum, which happens in actual wounds, it creates a distinctive halo pattern visible under UV light. These halos were found around the wrist wounds, the side wound, and the feet wounds. This type of pattern cannot be faked with paint or dye. It only occurs with real blood from actual wounds. Forensic analysis of the blood flow patterns showed gravity-consistent flows. The wrist wounds showed downward flow, exactly as you'd expect from a body suspended vertically on a cross. The side wound exhibited a lateral and downward direction, consistent with post-mortem bleeding from a spear wound. A 2023 study published in the journal Heritage used transmission electron microscopy and scanning electron microscopy to examine samples. They confirmed the presence of intact red blood cell structures with hemoglobin signatures at the microscopic level. This level of detail would be impossible to fake, even with modern technology, let alone in medieval times. STURP's official conclusion, published in 1981, was unequivocal. The shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin and also give a positive test for serum albumin. But they also admitted no combination of physical, chemical, biological, or medical circumstances could adequately account for the image. The Shroud of Turin remains now, as it has in the past, a mystery. And then came the blood type discovery that would connect this cloth to another relic half a world away. The second cloth. Evidence that would hold up in court. Now I need to tell you about something that most people have never heard of. A discovery so important that it transforms the entire shroud debate. In a cathedral in Oviedo, Spain, about 1,000 miles from Turin, sits another ancient cloth. It's much smaller than the shroud, measuring about 34 by 21 inches. There's no image on it, just stains. But these stains tell an extraordinary story. It's called the Sudarium of Oviedo, and according to both tradition and scientific analysis, this was the face cloth used to cover Jesus' head immediately after the crucifixion, before his body was removed from the cross. The Gospel of John specifically mentions this cloth. In John 20:6-7, when Peter and John discover the empty tomb, they find the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Jewish burial custom at the time required covering the face of a crucified person immediately after death, both as a sign of respect and to contain any bodily fluids before the body could be properly prepared for burial. And here's what makes the Sudarium absolutely crucial. Unlike the shroud, which has gaps in its documented history, the Sudarium has been continuously tracked since 631 CE. It was brought to Spain from Jerusalem in 614 CE to escape the Persian invasion. King Alfonso II built a special chapel for it in 840 CE. It's been in Oviedo ever since. So if the Sudarium covered the same person as the shroud, then the shroud must also be ancient, completely contradicting the 1988 carbon dating. Now here's where the evidence becomes overwhelming. In 1989, a Spanish research team called EDICES began the most detailed scientific study ever conducted on the Sudarium. What they found was extraordinary. First, the blood type. Testing confirmed that both the Sudarium and the shroud contain type AB blood, one of the rarest blood types, found in only about 3% of the population. But it's common in the Middle East, especially among Jewish populations. Second, the stains match. The Sudarium shows blood stains around the nose and mouth mixed with pulmonary edema fluid, a watery discharge that fills the lungs when someone dies of asphyxiation. The ratio, 1 part blood to 6 parts fluid. That's exactly what you'd expect from crucifixion, When someone is crucified, they die from asphyxiation as their body weight makes breathing increasingly impossible. Their lungs fill with fluid, and when the body is moved, this fluid discharges through the nose and mouth. Third, and this is where it gets really mind-blowing, the blood stains superimpose. Dr. Alan Wanger from Duke University used a technique called polarized image overlay to compare the two cloths. He identified 70 points of correlation on the front and 50 on the back. That's not a coincidence. Most judicial systems around the world require only 8 to 12 matching points to identify a person. This has a 120. In 2016, Dr. Juan Manuel Miñaro, a professor at the University of Seville, conducted an even more detailed forensic analysis comparing the two cloths. His conclusion: the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo.
Latest on findings being published in a new book out today on the Shroud of Turin. That's the linen cloth.
Almost certainly covered the cadaver of the same person. Both cloths show trauma to the bridge of the nose, swelling of the right cheek, the tip of the nose twisted to the left, small puncture wounds all over the head, consistent with a crown of thorns, the same blood type, the same Middle Eastern pollen. But here's the detail that seals it: the length of the nose. Scientists calculated from the Sudarium stains that the nose of the person it covered was exactly 8 centimeters, just over 3 inches. They then measured the nose on the shroud image. Perfect match. 8 centimeters. Pollen analysis tells the same story. Dr. Max Fry identified plant species on the Sudarium that only grow in Palestine, specifically within a 20-kilometer radius of Jerusalem. These same pollen types appear on the shroud. 3 species were particularly significant. Gundelia tournefortii, which scholars believe may have been used to make the crown of thorns, the Rose of Sharon, Cistus creticus, tamarisk, and terebinth plants, all native to Jerusalem, all blooming in springtime, around Passover. If the shroud is a medieval forgery, then someone would have had to create a second cloth 600 years earlier.
Perhaps no religious artifact on planet Earth creates as much fascination and controversy as the Shroud of Turin. Is this the real burial cloth of Jesus?
Plant Middle Eastern pollen on both, match the blood type, position, and stain patterns perfectly, and somehow coordinate them to tell the exact same story. The probability of that? Statistically impossible. What AI saw that humans couldn't. And then AI entered the conversation, and everything exploded. When researchers fed ultra-high-resolution digital scans of the shroud into powerful neural networks, they weren't looking for miracles. The AI's job was simply to uncover hidden patterns typically invisible to the human eye. What the machine found was nothing short of extraordinary. The AI detected that the image intensity contains 98.4% of the information. When researchers calculated the correlation between the image and its negative, they found it was almost perfectly inversely correlated at 0.99984. But here's where it gets mind-bending. The AI found a hidden layer of digital information, a complex system of faint geometric symmetries and repeating mathematical ratios across the entire image. This isn't just random noise or artifact degradation. It's structured order, mathematical precision. It's like finding a watermark or ghostly blueprint embedded deep within the fabric itself. The AI confirmed the 3-dimensional properties we already knew about, but with far greater precision, showing a mathematical consistency that would be almost impossible for any forger to achieve. Think about what medieval forgers had to work with. No computers, no understanding of mathematical encoding, no concept of 3-dimensional data storage, no knowledge of photography or negative images. And yet, according to AI analysis, this cloth contains layers of geometric information that obey specific mathematical laws, information that remained completely hidden until machine learning could detect it. The AI revealed details about the man's physical characteristics, the nature of his injuries, and circumstances surrounding his death that were previously impossible to detect. Some researchers found recurring patterns and alignments in the face, hands, and torso that obey a specific geometric logic. These patterns follow mathematical ratios similar to harmonic frequencies, like musical notes that sound pleasing together because of their mathematical relationships. The AI found similar harmonies in the spatial relationships between different parts of the image, the distance between the eyes, the proportions of the hands, the curvature of the ribs, all linked by an underlying geometric structure. And here's the kicker. These patterns were completely invisible to the human eye, buried in the visual noise of the fabric's weave and centuries of damage. But the AI saw them clearly. To make sure it wasn't a glitch, researchers fed the AI images of other ancient linens and artistic renderings. It found nothing. The geometric structure was unique to the shroud. The implications are staggering. The image seems to have been formed not by direct contact, but by some kind of force or energy that projected information onto the cloth from a distance. The physics that don't add up. Scientists have proposed various theories to explain how the image could have formed. The corona discharge. Hypothesis. A high-voltage electrical field around a body could theoretically cause an image to form on nearby cloth. The radiation burst theory. A short, intense burst of radiation, perhaps ultraviolet light, could scorch the top layer of linen fibers. But here's the problem. Experiments using these methods never reproduce all the unique features. They might create superficial images, but not with the perfect three-dimensional data, not with the hidden geometric patterns, not with the photographic negative properties. In fact, when physicists in Geneva tried to model the energy burst needed to produce the shroud's three-dimensional depth, they calculated something shocking. It would require a pulse of ultraviolet radiation lasting less than 140 billionth of a second. That's far shorter than any natural phenomenon known on Earth. And to generate that kind of energy uniformly across a human-sized form would require power equivalent to all the electrical energy produced in Europe at once. Yet somehow, if this happened 2,000 years ago, it left behind not scorched or destroyed linen, but a perfect, undamaged image, a snapshot frozen in time. One physicist put it bluntly, "This doesn't behave like an artifact. It behaves like a phenomenon." When AI was used to reconstruct what the person on the shroud looked like, the results showed a man with wide-open eyes gazing straight ahead, long flowing hair, a trim beard, and wounds consistent with crucifixion. Marks from a crown of thorns, lacerations on the back, and bruises on the shoulders. The reconstructed face looks serene, not distorted by agony. Some scientists who viewed the holographic projection sat in silence, with one whispering, "This looks less like death and more like transformation." Two cloths, one from Turin, one from Oviedo, separated for over 1,000 years, but forensically linked to the same man. Hidden 3D data, geometric codes, real blood, and impossible patterns. Only AI can see them. Forgery or divine relic? We still don't know. AI didn't answer the mystery. It made it deeper. If this blew your mind, like, subscribe and drop your theory, medieval trick, ancient miracle, or something beyond imagination. The shroud is silent, but its secrets are finally speaking.